Om Shri Sairam. My humble pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan. Today we have an eminent speaker, Brother Srirama, with us. Brother Srirama hails from Chennai. He had his first encounter with Bhagwan during early 1990s. Being the first in his family to have come into Swami's fold, Brother Srirama completed his Balvikas from Chennai. He graduated with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Chennai. Later, he moved to Singapore in 2009 and went on to complete his PhD in the area of batteries for electric cars from Singapore. During his stay in Singapore, he was involved in the SSE program, teaching Vedas. He was also a member of the Singapore Vedam Group. After completing his postdoctoral fellowship in Singapore, he moved to Germany in 2016. Currently, he resides with his family in Munich, Germany. He is involved in the Sai Center activities in Munich, where he continues to teach Vedam. He is also involved in teaching Vedam online to native German devotees across Germany and Austria. Also, a kind request to the participants to keep their mics on mute. Let us now enjoy the satsang. Jai Sai Ram.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Offering myself at the feet of my mother Sai, I thank the organizers for having me here today. Respected elders, brothers, sisters, and kids, if there are any out there, it's my greatest privilege today to sit amidst you and share and relive some of my encounters with Swami. And before even I start to speak, the first thing that springs upon in my memory is to chant this particular verse, which is taken from Anandavalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad. Om Sa eko manusha anandah te eshatam manusha anandah Sa eko manushya gandharvanam anandah श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं मनुष्यगन्धर्वाणामानन्दाः स एको देवगन्धर्वाणामानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं देवगन्धर्वाणामानन्दाः स एकः पितॄणां चिरलोकलोकानामानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं पितॄणां चिरलोकलोकानामानन्दाः स एक आजानजानां देवानामानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतमाजानजानां देवानामानन्दाः स एकः कर्मदेवानां देवानामानन्दः ये कर्मणा देवानपि यन्ति श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं कर्मदेवानां देवानामानन्दाः स एको देवानामानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं देवानामानन्दाः स एक इन्द्रस्यानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतमिन्द्रस्यानन्दाः स एको बृहस्पतेरानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं बृहस्पतेरानन्दाः स एकः प्रजापतेरानन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य ते एषतं प्रजापतेरानन्दाः स एको ब्रह्मण आनन्दः श्रोत्रियस्य चाकामः तस्य स यश्चायं पुरुषे यश्चासावादित्ये स एकः स य एवंवित् अस्माल्लोकात् प्रेत्य एतमन्नमयमात्मानमुपसङ्क्रामति एतं प्राणमयमात्मानमुपसङ्क्रामति एतं मनोमयमात्मानमुपसङ्क्रामति येतं विज्ञानमयमात्मानमुपसङ्क्रामति येतमानन्दमयमात्मानमुपसङ्क्रामति यतो वाचो निवर्तन्ते अप्राप्य मनसा सह आनन्दं ब्रह्मणो विद्वान्. I chose to start with this verse for two reasons. The first reason being, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Words come defeated when it tries to explain the glory of the avatar. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Even the glory of the avatar is beyond the comprehension of the mind. So we as humans equipped with the faculty of words and mind will fail miserably to actually describe this avatar, Bhagwan, who you can see behind. And so I wanted to start with the first acknowledgement that whatever I share with you today is just a fraction of what he is. And the second thing I wanted to start with this verse is because back in the year 2010, when I was in the Sai Kulwant Hall, I was going through a phase of wanting to know what this self is all about. This phase was one where I was reading some scriptures on Ramana Maharishi. I was listening to many discourses on Swami, because that particular phase was keeping me restless as I wanted to understand the nature of Atma, or the self. And as was the practice in Prashanti, usually this particular Taittiriya Upanishad, and what I mean was the Anandavalli portion, is usually chanted on Saturdays. And even as I chant these verses back at home in Singapore, I used to wonder, what is this Atma all about? What are the rishis, the seers who have described this in Anandavalli actually talking about? Because I did not have a personal first-hand experience of what it is. And it so happened, I think a good 6 months passed in the year 2010. And then I had my flight booked for Prashanti. And I landed in Prashanti Nilayam. And it was one Saturday evening, and Bhagwan was beginning to come out of Yajur Mandir. And as we all know, the evening program in Kulwant Hall starts with Vedam. And it was just time when the last Anuvaka of Rudram was being chanted. And Bhagwan was being pushed in the chair, and he was amazing in grand splendor as he came out in this evening sun. And here I was with my own silly mind frame, if I may call that, trying to challenge Bhagwan. Swami, if you at all hear my prayers, that I'm trying to understand what this Atma is all about, what this self-realization that people like Ramana Maharshi have taught about, would you show me a proof that you have actually listened to my prayers? And even I gave a concession to Swami that you don't have to give me an experience of this Atma, but at least show me an indication that you have been listening to what I have been praying all along. And as Rudram was over, the Taittiriya Upanishad portion was being chanted. And Swami was slowly marching from the ladies' side into the gents' side. And for those of you who are aware of the Anandavalli, it actually starts with the Annamaya, or the body sheath, the most grossest form. And then it slowly talks about how the existence is also felt at subtle layers like the Pranamaya, or the breath sheath, the Manomaya, or the mind sheath, And then comes even subtler, that is the Vijnanamaya, the intellect sheath. And finally comes the Anandamaya, which is the Atma itself. So this is how the Anandavalli is actually structured. And as Bhagwan was inching slowly towards the gent side, the chanting was also going on from the grossest, the body sheath, into the different sheaths. And the darshan was going on, and I was fortunate enough to have had the front seat. I was seated in the first row. And as Swami went around, he came near the row where I happened to be seated. And just a few yards before, I was again internally praying to Swami, Swami, okay, now you're going to cross me, but I will take it as a clue or an acknowledgement if you pass by me when the Upanishad talks about the Anandamaya Kosha. And exactly what happened was Swami came, it was the Manomaya Kosha, and then the Anandamaya Kosha was soon about to begin. And I will tell you what happened probably towards the end of the talk. That might uh, perhaps make sense why I wanted to start with this. Since I did not start this talk in a chronological order, I started with 2010. Now my memory takes me back to the year 2000, not 2000, it was 1990s, early 90s. And before I even start this, to set the context right, I was hearing about a story where a group of students were seated before Swami, and Swami asked the students, boys, what is the most rarest of the blessings? And one of the students apparently got up and told Swami, Swami, it is the knowledge of the self, or Atma Vidya. Well, in my opinion, that was quite a good answer, but Swami was not happy with the answer. And then the other boy, seeing this, got up and told Swami, it's mukti or moksha. Swami said, Ledu, not. And then the boys were actually looking at each other. If Atma Vidya, or if even mukti or moksha is not the rare blessing, what else could be a more rarer blessing than this? And to hear it from Bhagwan's mouth, Swami himself said, the rarest blessing is to be a contemporary of this avatar, of this Sai avatar. By the word contemporary, it means that even to live in this earth when the avatar existed is a rare blessing. It's not available to everybody on this planet. We see millions of people around us. At least they have been fortunate to actually be contemporaries of this avatar. And Bhagwan then went on to say, even rare is to actually know that this is the avatar. So imagine we have all lived, very fortunate to have lived when this avatar was in the physical frame. And we have also had the greatest privilege to know that he is the avatar. And so then Swami went on to say, even rare is to fall in love with this avatar, because it's not easy to fall in love with this avatar. And today's talk actually is titled My Love Story Stung by Love, because I have been stung by his love. And just like what Manika Vasakar used to say in Tamil, because of his grace, he fell in love with Shiva. It was not because of his past efforts or karmas. And I very much reflect Manika Vasakar's thought that it's a great fortune that he gifted all of us this opportunity to have actually fallen in love with this avatar. And Swami did not stop there. He said, boys, there is one more thing that is even rare to this. And the boys were looking, oh, to fall in love is rarer, we thought, but what could be even more rarer than this? Swami said, to constantly pine and yearn for this love is the rarest of blessing. We've seen Meera, who has been a stalwart of an example, Hanuman, another beautiful example. These are legendaries who have pined and earned for the love of their Lord. And as Swami put it, let us even start with this prayer. Bhagwan, actually, we are so grateful that you have made us contemporaries of this avatar. Your grace has made us that realize that you are the avatar, and it's your ultimate supreme grace that we have also fallen in love for this avatar. Swami, may we never lose this pining and thirst. May we yearn for this love of yours, Swami. I think this is one of the prayers that I always start my day with, to pine and yearn and never be satiated for this love that exists between Bhagwan and us. So, having talked about the contemporary of the avatar, I was born in Chennai in the year 1985. And I was born to a traditional Indian family, a Hindu family. And ritualistic worship was quite predominant in my lineage. And we had no idea of who Bhagwan was. And my mother, who was very spiritually inclined, in fact, I owe this talk to her. She's no more. She passed away in 2003. But she was such a spiritually inclined soul that she treated Lord Subramanya or Kartikeya, in Tamil we call him as Muruga, as uh, the, as her most favorite deity. And she would always go to Subramanya for anything. And life, in if I recollect my childhood days, they would start with chanting of Kanda Sashti Kavacham, which many of you would have known. It's something that we started the day with, and that's something with which my mother would end the day with. And in between, again, was filled with contemplation of Muruga. For her, everything was Subramanya. And so I was naturally grown up in this environment. I was brought up there. And my mother recollected once that I used to even chant Kanda Sashti Kavacham when I was at the age of 3 or 4, just when I was about to speak words properly. I was already able to recite the Kanda Sashti Kavacham. So that was the amount of nurturing that went in. And this was probably 6 years old or 5.5. And we were staying close to a very famous Shiva temple, which was uh, even termed as the Padal Petrasthalam, where Manika Vasagar actually sung songs in praise of Shiva. That was a very famous temple, which was just a stone's throw from my house. And it was the practice that on weekends, I would go to this temple, pay obeisance to the deity, come back, and then resume my playing. So, as was the schedule, I went to the temple, and this was in the year 1991. I was 6 years old then. And the Vrikshika is the Sthala Vriksham. This is a specific tree in South India for those from Germany who are joining us. This is a very special tree which is dedicated to the Shiva deity in this temple. And there was a lady who was seated under this tree, and she beckoned me. Hardly 6 years old, I went to her out of fear, because when an elder beckons you, it's out of respect, and sometimes by the nature look of the person, out of fear, you go to them. And so this lady who beckoned me was a bit fearful. I felt afraid, and I went near her, and she said, "Sit down." And so I sat down and realized there were at least a dozen of kids who were seated there. And then I looked at all these kids. They were constantly repeating a word which I've never heard in my life: Om Shri Sai Ram, Om Shri Sai Ram, because that was 21 times chanting was something that was ingrained in Balvikas. And back then I did not know this was Balvikas. And I was wondering what is this sigh that I keep hearing. And then I looked up and saw the picture of a person in an orange robe with a mop of black hair. And you all know by now who I'm referring to, but back then there was no Google, so I did not know who this person was. So I just looked, and at the first sight, I felt terrible because I did not feel any connect with this picture that I was seeing. And to actually look at this image of the person in the black mop of hair, I felt a bit afraid. And I was hoping and waiting for this class or the gathering to be dismissed. And it was time, and the class got over, and I went back home without knowing who this person was, without knowing what this setting was. And what I did was I went back to my mom and told her, never ever in my life I would go to this place again on a Sunday, because this happened on a Sunday. And my mom asked me what was so wrong there. I mean, this is a temple that you go every day. Why not? What happened today? And I told her that I do not know anything about it, but I do not want to see this person who I saw was very fearful. And so, being engaged in her own practice, she just left it to me. She thought maybe I was crazy, and she did not inquire much about what had actually happened. And as fate would had it, I tried avoiding going to this temple on Sundays, so I would make it on Saturdays, and I was quite successful for at least a couple of months. And then one of my relatives visited us from Vellore, and my dad had instructed me to take them to this famous temple. And I was very afraid of my dad because, back then, at least in 90s, disobeying a dad's word would be quite costly. So I took to his word. I took my relative, and I was praying and hoping that this gathering was not to be there. And again, as fate would have it, the same lady called me and said, "Hey, come sit down." So I had no other option. I told my relative, "Could you please wait here?" And I went back and sat in this class. Again, I looked at the picture. I did not know who this person was. But this time I was not fearful, yet there was no feeling of love that was also bubbling in my heart. I felt comfortable but not fearful. And there ended the story. I went back home and I told my mom, maybe I will go on Sundays to these classes, because something that they also taught on this particular class was some shlokas that my mother had previously taught me. So it was something that I could relate to. And I slowly started going to what was called as the Balvikas Group 1 classes. And then I came to know the person was Sai Baba, but I prefer to call him Swami. That is something that I always relate to him. And I told my mom that, look, mom, there is this person called Satya Sai Baba, and this uh, when you where I gather is Balvikas. There are a lot of boys and girls who gather here, and I had made good friends. So I told my mom I would continue going to these classes. And it so happened that in a month's time, we visited one of our aunt's place in Chennai. Uh, we visited her many number of times, but we did not know that they were actually also devotees of Bhagwan. My cousin, who was quite serious about Swami Shivananda, and he was almost in most of the time spending his time in Rishikesh, was there in Chennai. And when I reached their place, I opened my cousin's puja room and found I actually could not see any wall there. All the puja room was filled with pictures of Swami. And I asked my cousin, "Are you Swami's devotee?" And he said, "Yes, of course." And then I asked him, "Would you be kind to borrow me a picture of Swami?" And so he gave me the first picture of Bhagwan. And I told my mom, I need to take this home. I was a bit skeptical if my mom would let this happen because, as I told, this is a traditional South Indian family. But my mom was kind enough; she let me, and so we had the first picture of Bhagwan taken home. And on one fine weekend, I think I was still 6 years old then. I asked my mom, "Could we start doing bhajans at our home?" And my mom was a bit surprised. She said, "Bhajans? You do not know any bhajans." And then I told her, "No, in Bal Vikas, I've started learning a few bhajans. And all I knew were just two bhajans. One was the Ganesha Charanam, the first bhajan, and the next one was the Rama bhajan." And to simply bait my mom, to pull her and to attract her, I said, "Mom, you don't have to sing bhajans of Swami. You can also sing bhajans on Muruga, or you can simply, if you wish, can chant Sashti Kavasam if you like it," because that was something that was close to her. And so we started the first bhajan at our home on a Saturday in the morning. And after the bhajan session hardly lasted 10 minutes because we did not know bhajans. My mom was still not a devotee of Swami. She did not accept Swami fully. In 10 minutes, the first session got over. And what we found was the picture of Swami was completely covered with vibhuti. And both me and my mom were looking at each other because we did not know that there was this phenomenon of vibhuti manifestation. And as I told you, there was hardly any internet those in the year 1991. And so we could not even go to the nearby people and ask, "What is this?" And my mom took the vibhuti in her hand and she smelled it, and she found it is, yes, the holy ash, vibhuti. But she was looking at me and asked, "Did you throw this vibhuti here?" I told her, "No, why would I?" And I even took her by her hand. I remember this quite vividly because I held her hand, took her from the living room to the puja room, and told her, "Look, this is the container in which vibhuti is kept, and the container is not in the living room. I did not do this." And okay, we felt, let's not go into what happened really, but we took this as Swami's prasadam, his way of uh, acknowledging that he is indeed present. And that's how the first visiting card or the miracle happened. Yet Swami did not enter the heart of my mother, or he did not completely enter my heart, because I was still more mechanically attending Balvikas, singing bhajans. Still that flavor of love did not sprout in me. And I think in a couple of years' time, as I was, Balvikas became quite normal and a routine in my life. And my mom was working for the Tamil Nadu government secretariat. And she learned that this group of employees in secretariat, Tamil Nadu, they had their own samiti in their office. And there was a huge following for Bhagwan. And she happened to be on one of the Thursdays after lunch. She visited the Samiti in her office, and she was listening to a lot of bhajans, not just the two bhajans that I was singing. And as for many of us, bhajans are a beautiful medium to connect to Swami. And after her very first bhajan session at her office, she was completely in love with Swami. I did not know how such a transformation could happen over a bhajan session. It is Swami's own way of connecting or pulling each devotee. And she came back home and told me, "Swami is God." I was looking and I asked her, "How about Lord Muruga?" She said, "He is Muruga." And the kind of confidence with which she actually told this, I could not still comprehend, because firstly, I did not know what is this concept of God. And secondly, I was too playful at that age to really contemplate on what she was saying. And since she joined the Samiti in Secretariat, we got the first invite to visit Prashanti. And these group of devotees actually were serving, were doing yearly service in Prashanti Nilayam South Indian Canteen. And it was time for the next service. And my mom had actually given her name, and she was kind enough to pull my name into it. And she asked my dad if he was interested, but he refused to come. So it was just me, my mom, and one of my cousins who made this very first trip to Prashanti Nilayam. And still a very, very little toddler, hardly 7 or 8 years old, I went to Prashanti Nilayam with my mother. And even as we entered the arches of the village of Puttaparthi, the devotees or the co-office workers who happened to be my mother's colleagues, they were explaining, oh, this is the first arch. This marks the beginning of the Prashanti, the holy presence in this universe. And they were kind of building up the atmosphere for us. And as we slowly entered, we reached the main entrance gate of Prashanti Nilayam through this chartered bus. And we were given an accommodation in the sheds. Back then, I'm sure many of you have been there. Prashanti was very different back in the early 90s. There was hardly any accommodation. All that we had was sheds, which were huge halls. And so we were given accommodation in this hall, which had absolutely no physical comforts. And so after we freshened up ourselves, we came to the accommodations office, which we even see today. That's just opposite, adjacent to the South Indian canteen. And the group leader uh, told us that uh, he briefed us of what are the do's and don'ts in this trip. And the first do's, he said, was you have to be in the South Indian canteen unless or otherwise you have been called by Swami. So that was the first do's. And the first don't that he said was no going for darshan. And I did not know what darshan even meant, because this is the first time I'm hearing the word darshan where somebody could grant darshan. Because what I have been used to is visiting temples and seeking darshan of the Lord. And here was this coordinator telling us that Swami would give darshan. So that kind of intrigued me. And I asked mom, Amma, what is this darshan that he's talking about? And my mom told equally, she did not have an idea. And so she said, just wait, we will ask him. And after he briefed us, he said, uh, this one time, we will all go to darshan before we start the service. So we were about to start the service in the South Indian canteen on that evening. And so he told us that let us all go and have Swami's darshan and then start the service. So then I did not know back then that there was a separate queue for gents and ladies. And so my mom went her own way. And now I had to queue up on the gents side. And I went with the coordinator, who was a male, and entered into the Kulwant Hall. So back then, just to take you back to those wonderful days in Prashanti, huge serpentine queues that would go all the way from Ganesha, the place where we see Ganesha temple today. The queues would go all the way up, almost near to the hilltop. Such were long serpentine queues. And we were actually made to sit in these queues for a good uh, 2-3 hours. And then we would be asked to come down and then sit again just in front of Ganesha's temple, again for 1 hour time. So 4 hours in this hot sun. And then comes the queue system, where even if you have been early, the first person would pick up the queue lot, and then the luck would decide whether you go into the hall first or the last. And it's also a very common experience for you all that even if we had, say, 6 hours before in the queue, we might end up going last into the Kulwant Hall. It is such a memorable experience. And the person who just kicks in when the ticket is being picked up would end up landing first inside the Kulwant Hall. So it was a great sight those days back in the early 90s. And I had my luck. I was lucky enough to actually have seated myself in a row which had the first token number. So first darshan, first token number, and here I was entering Kulwant Hall. As usual, people started running, and I just followed them and made a place for myself in the very first row. Until then, a few minutes later, I came to know that there was this very elderly Sevadal who saw me right in the first row and told, "Hey, boy, you're too small. You will fall in the feet of Swami or disturb Swami when he's walking. So go back and sit." I felt a bit miserable, but I did not know what this form was about because I've not seen Swami physically. So I did not really know what I will be missing. And I said, okay, I will move away. And I just went on and sat down in the second row. And as you all would recollect of people who had darshans, the silence in Kulwant Hall before Swami would arrive is something very strange. I would call it, it's a deafening silence. There are different kind of silence, but this Kulwant Hall has a very different mood to it, where you only hear the sound of the metal detectors going on once in a while when the students would walk in or when devotees would walk in, and apart from that, it would be deafening. And for me, this was the first time I was actually experiencing this kind of a silence, and I just drifted into sleep because it was a lullaby, and I slept off. And I don't know how much time passed by, but back in those days, it was the instrumental music that would actually mark the entry of Bhagwan. And as I was fast asleep, a flute music started to fill the air. And that's when I looked at my neighbors who were seated with all their necks craving and craning on the right side, because Swami, I think, was still residing in the Purna Chandra, not in the Yajur Mandir back then. And so Swami slowly started walking from the Purna Chandra into the ladies' side. And this was the first sight that I think, if at all I will not forget anything in my life, this was the sight that I would never forget, because all I saw was a, a speck of orange and a dot of black mop of hair. That's it. And I hope I'm not making an overstatement or not trying to hype this up, but I felt I knew him from this, from such distance. The first sight, I felt I knew him. And not only that, if you remember a few minutes back, I said I was more mechanically looking at Swami during my Bal Vikas without any sort of flavor for love. But this speck of orange and black somehow filled my heart with love. I think for a 6-year-old kid, if at all love could be more relatable, it could be the love of the mother. And I felt this is exactly the proximity, this is exactly the warmth that I could feel. And still Swami was on the lady's side, far away, and slowly he started walking. uh, and for again those of you who had the privilege of seeing, many a times you would wonder if this is Swami really walking or was he floating. And I had exactly the same question. I was in fact trying to crane my neck and see if he was trying to use a stool or float, or was he really walking. And as he came closer and closer, I realized that there is something within me that was actually transforming. And what happened, which I very, very vividly remember, was my body began to shake, tremble, if tremble would be the right word. I was trembling, not out of fear, not out of um, any unpleasant feeling, but a trembling which is derived from this source of love that was walking. And this trembling, as Swami began to inch closer and closer, only became intense. And I was actually holding my left hand with my right hand so that it's not visible. The trembling was so visible, like if you had seen somebody with Parkinson's, you could easily feel that one of the hands would be shaking. So this was the kind of trembling I had. And I was praying to Swami, Swami, please don't make it so obvious, because I didn't want to be noticed at this time. And as Swami came closer, the trembling transformed itself into weeping, and I was crying, sobbing unconsolably. And it's not something that I'm trying to glorify myself here, but the point I'm trying to drive here is for a 6-year-old to sob and cry uncontrollably is something that cannot happen with effort. It was totally an effortless effort. And even as Swami passed by, he just did not speak anything. He locked his eyes into my eyes. He looked deep into the eyes, and I was gasping for air because the sobbing was so deep that I could not stop but gasp for air, and I was still crying. And as Swami walked past by, I felt numb. I did not really understand what was happening. What had transformed in these few minutes was beyond beyond any rational description or logical reasoning. And as the darshan session got over, I went back and waited for my mom, and I could see my mom was already in tears. She had a very similar experience, and we both hugged each other, and we felt so happy that finally we have actually met the love who has taken shape of a human form. And bhajans became quite a normal routine at home. And Swami, of course, blessed us with Pada Namaskar. And he also blessed us with multiple chances of having given the opportunities to serve him in the South Indian canteen. And things started becoming so exciting for my mom that she would almost travel every month to Prashanti Nilayam. And I was lucky enough to actually climb on her back, and I would make a visit to Prashanti every month. Swami never spoke to us. Swami did not give us interviews, but the kind of feeling that we had in our heart after every trip was so very captivating. And it only helped us to continue in our journey. So, uh, starting from being a contemporary of this avatar, Swami gave us a rare opportunity of actually knowing that he's the avatar. And then he also gave us one more opportunity of actually having fallen in love for this avatar. And to cut the long story short, things always do not stay green, or with Swami, as you know, he always gives you this first uh, long bait. And once this period of honeymoon, if I may use this word, is over, then comes a lot of churning that happens within. And so I would now quickly take you to this year of 2003, where 2002 December, in fact, my mother was suffering from uterus. She had problems with her menopause, and her uterus had to be removed. And she wanted to wait for Swami's approval. And of course, she visited Prashanti many a times, but Swami physically did not give a sign of approval. And she felt, okay, if Swami said, has not told, don't go for the surgery, that itself means he is permitting her to have the surgery. So she went ahead with the surgery. And we all know this uterus removal is not a very complicated surgery. It's uh, quite a normal surgery. And she wanted to have it done using a laparoscope. And so the date for the surgery was fixed. And just before, when she was going to be anesthetized, the locket with Swami's chain actually fell from her neck. And even then, she took this as Swami's blessing. She said, just like how a garland would fall down from a picture of Swami, she felt that this is Swami's acknowledgement that he is, letting the chain off from the neck. And so she went for the surgery, and everything was normal. The next day, she was given food. I think she had tender coconut water, and slowly things started to change. Her stomach began to bloat, and she was given some breakfast again. And all this began to cause a reaction, and the stomach was seen to be bloating. And came a point of time where she had difficulties in breathing now. And by then, my dad was alarmed, seeing, a huge swelling stomach, and we informed the doctors, and we did not know what was happening. And the hospital in which she was placed was not too sophisticated to handle this case, which is now turning to be critical. So she was put in an ambulance and taken to a bigger hospital. And she was immediately rushed into the ICU and had to be administered a ventilator because she was not able to breathe. And upon examination, the surgeon found that the person who had actually operated on her in the previous hospital had poked the small intestine while finding his way with the laparoscope into the uterus. And he did not realize that he had actually poked the intestine. And by my mother drinking tender coconut and whatever food material she had, actually everything had come out from the intestine and it had mixed with the bloodstream, and the entire blood became septic. And things were only becoming worse with every day. And she was put on ventilator for the next full week, and she was totally given tranquilized because she went through enormous pain. She was kept on a tranquilizer, and I think it was 10 days past, and I went to see my mom. I was not visiting the hospital every day because this was a sight I did not want to look at. Her face was bloated and she was in terrible pain. I could not take this. And so on the 10th day, when I went and visited my mom, she could not actually speak. So she asked for a paper and a pen, and she wrote these words, which I still remember. She said, "The doctors are speaking," and the doctors, unfortunately, they spoke right in front of my mom that she would not survive, which is something they shouldn't in fact do. I mean, the case of the patients have to be discussed outside, but they felt she was tranquilized, and so they discussed her case in front, and she wrote, "Srirama, I will not survive. Don't waste your efforts in trying to pull me back." And this is the last line, is something which I will never forget. She wrote, "Make Swami happy." And I was in my 12th class, uh, and I wanted to cry when she wrote it, but I couldn't because I wanted to instill confidence in her. I told, "No, Amma, this is just not going to happen. We know how Swami would test us, but he would never let us." And she again wrote, "Make a promise that you will make Swami happy." And it was quite strange for me. Why is she actually asking it again? And so I promised her that I will make Swami happy. I still do not know how to make Swami happy though. But I keep repeating this to my daughter, who is 5 years old. Every day before she goes to bed, this is something I tell her: make Swami happy. So, anyway, and all this happened. She stayed in the ventilator for 20 odd days and she passed away. And her body was brought back home. And we have a huge picture of those of you who have seen Sundaram, Swami's abode in Chennai. The same picture in Sundaram was also there in our house. And we placed her mortal body just near this picture of Swami. And I was the only child, nobody to really support us. Of course, we had relatives who supported us, but
Muted.
yeah. And what happened was, I prayed to Swami. The next day, her body was about to be taken to the cremation ground, and all I asked Swami was, "Swami, please give me this strength to cremate her, because it's the body that you've loved so much. It's the body that you've longed so much for. And here I'm actually going to set fire to this body." And what exactly I prayed, Swami made it happen. Not a single drop of tear came from my eyes. because I had to support my dad then. So I was very brave. I did not act. I was really brave, and I cremated, finished off all that had to be done. And as I returned home, I looked at Swami's picture, and I felt a different emotion. I was angry, furious with Swami, because here he was laughing in this picture at home, and I could not bear this sight. And I told Swami, is this what you would do for somebody who has been, at least in my eyes, so very loyal and faithful to you? Back then, I did not know what surrender was. Back then, I did not know whatever happened was the best that could happen. I did not know all this back then. And the attachment to mother was so much that I could not stop but questioning Swami. And I went to the extent of closing every picture in our home with a cloth so that I don't see his face again. And as many of you would know, in Vedanta, we call Mala, Vrikshepa, and Avarana, right? The three dusts, the three disturbances that come on the mirror. One could be dust settling on the mirror that stops us from seeing our own image. The second could be the mirror shaking that could again stop us from actually seeing the image. And the third was the avarana, where if you have a cloth covering the mirror, you do not see your reality or your reflection. And now here I was covering every picture in my house with a cloth so that I don't have to look at his face again. And again, I would, for the interest of time, skip and go forward. I did not want to go to Prashanti, and but still I had this sparkling anger in me, and so I decided I would go ask Swami why he did this. So I went to Prashanti, but never would Swami even look at me once, and that only added a lot of salt to the wound, because he need not speak to me, but at least he could have one look at me that would have eased me, but he did not do that. Again, now looking back, I know that's for my own evolution, but 2007 Swami came, if my memory is right, to Chennai for Atirudra Mahayagam. And again, I prepared myself well with a lot of questions that I had to ask Swami. 4 years after my mom had passed away, Swami came. I was actually waiting at the main road uh, in my two-wheeler, and already the police had cordoned all of us, making way for Swami's vehicle to come in. And even as I saw this form of Swami driving in the car, I just dropped my bike and started running madly, not out of not out of anger, but the same attraction that pulled me back. I just couldn't stop. I ran all the way and ventured into the venue where the yajna was happening. And I prepared myself with questions. And as Swami walked past, I could not ask a single question. I'm sure many of you would have had this experience where we want to ask Swami a lot, but when you actually look at him, everything is just frozen. And then, as Swami did not really answer anything, but the wound was healed, I knew this is also for my own good. And back in 2009, I was already in Singapore with my PhD program, and still the flavor of love for Swami was not resonating inside me, although the anger for Swami had gone. And when I started my PhD, it was, I think, 2 months after I joined. Um, I was just installing the app of Radio Sai in my mobile, and there was this discourse stream, and I heard Swami's discourse after a very, very long time. And Swami was talking about, this is how, nothing can be a coincidence. It's all Swami's planning. Swami was talking about how he took care of one of the students who had lost his mother without even the student knowing that Swami was doing all this. Swami was paying the hostel fee. Swami was inquiring the warden if the student had actually had food and how he was studying. And the student never knew all this. And Swami was explaining this in the discourse. And I was actually in the shuttle bus, And hearing this, I just started crying unconsolably. And the very same sobbing that occurred in the first darshan happened again. And people near me felt there was something wrong, and they immediately rushed and gave me water, and they asked if we should call for an ambulance. But I said, no, this is all fine. I know what to do now. So I went to the lab and booked my first flight ticket. Right on that evening, I flew from Singapore to Prashanti Nilayam. And the of course, Swami had retired by then. I reached Prashanti late in the night. And the next day morning, I was in Prashanti. And it was this time that the morning darshans were slowly becoming unpredictable. Swami would come once in a while, maybe many a times he would not come. And what happened was, I was seated in the Kulwant Hall, and I think only for the Vedam team was in the Kulwant Hall, and the rest of the hall was quite empty. A few elders were seated at the back, and the entire hall was empty. And I was quite happy to sit in the hall. And as the chanting was going on, suddenly the pitch of the chanting was increasing, and I knew that some activity was also going on near the Ajur Mandir. And Bhagwan came out for darshan. And the beauty, if I can say that, is back in those days, earlier days, it was the instrumental music that would be played. But now, since Vedam was always going on, many people did not even realize actually Swami is coming out for darshan. So the hall was still relatively empty, and Swami was pulled in the chair, and he came straight at me and asked the student to stop near me. And the chair was then turned, perpendicular, and here was Swami looking at me face to face. Backdrop, Vedam was going on. And for a good 2 or 3 anuvakas, which should have, in Rudram, I think it should have at least lasted 2 minutes. Swami was completely looking into my eyes without any expression. Both of our eyes were locked. We didn't bat our eyelids. Swami was looking deep into me, and I was looking deep into Swami, and just started crying and crying. And Swami, in his own way, smiled very, very a little small smile on the right side of his cheek, and he wrote something in the air, did not speak a word, and he just went past by. And there I was, stuck, stung by his love again, because it was so easy to drift away from Swami. And if not for his grace, if not for his love, I wouldn't have been basking in this love of Swami that I'm doing today. And coming back to the incident that I started with, on the next trip where this chanting was of Anandavalli was going on, uh, where I left, if you recollect, I was challenging Swami to prove to me that he was listening to me. And even as this hymn of Anandavalli was going on about Atma, Swami just came near me and again paused until the entire canto of this Atma description was going on. Swami looked at me and then he nodded his head. Hmm? He even asked me, hmm? So it was, it was unsaid. I did not ask Swami verbatim by words that, Swami, show me an acknowledgement. Here he was by a nod, and he made sure I understood because I was dumb. So he made sure and he asked me, are you happy? Like, in this way. And then I just told Swami, thank you. What more can I say? I mean, he he proved to me, he doesn't have to prove, but he proved to me that he is listening to every single beat of the heart, not even a prayer, every single beat of the heart. He is actually listening. And I know it's already time, but I would want to narrate just one more incident before I close this. Uh, uh, a very recent incident that happened in Germany, and I think some of my colleagues who are also here would love to hear about this. Last year, we had a family from Singapore uh, visiting us in Germany, and it was on one evening that they visited our house, and we had a lovely bhajan session. And it was soon time for them to bid goodbye. So I drove them back. We live in a place called Freising in Germany, in Munich. And so I drove them back. So this family was a husband and a wife, and I drove them back to this railway station in Freising in Munich. And the family who visited us were very ardent devotees of Bhagwan, Satya Sai Baba, and they were also very ardent devotees of Shirdi Bhagwan. Uh, and so as the conversation was going on, we were talking about the two avatars, Shirdi Bhagwan and Satya Sai, uh, how how two different facets, yet the essence being very similar. And we spent a good 10-15 minutes talking about uh, Swami and Shirdi Bhagwan in the local language, or Tamil. So, and just to give you the context, this station on which we were standing was completely deserted. There was nobody. It was late in the night, and it was just the three of us who were standing and talking. And so the train came, they boarded the train and they left. And I had to now walk a good 80 to 100 meter on the platform, and it was pitch dark. And I slowly started walking, just reliving these moments. And there was a voice that called me, "Oi," a very deep voice. And I turned back. It was an old man, a German, a native German, dressed in very ragged, shabby clothing with a beard. And he called me and said, "Come," in German. He actually beckoned me in German. I was already fearful because it was pitch dark in the night, and the appearance of this person was not pleasing at all. And I went near him out of fear, and I did not know what he attack me, or what was the reason for him calling. And he told something in German, and he said, "Es ist immer fröhlich und freu, wenn du unsere Geschichte sprechen." I'm not repeating it verbatim. I've written it down in my diary. But what he said was, "Is it not always such a pleasure to talk about our stories?" That was the English translation of what he said. And I could not understand, because here we were talking in our mother tongue Tamil, and this person was at least 80 to 100 meters away. That's a long distance away. And a native German asking me this question: "Is it not a pleasure to talk about our stories?" So when he used the word "our," it's obviously a reference to both Shri Bhagwan and Satya Sai. And the immediate reaction was, I was afraid, because I'm not good at speaking German. So to even understand the gravity of what he said took me a few seconds. And then I realized, oh my God, this is uh, such a, I should immediately look for this person. I turned back, and as you would have guessed already, there was nobody in the station. The station was empty. And so then I called this family up and told them, because they're very ardent devotees, and here is Swami, who is able to actually hit multiple mangoes in just one shot, because this was an acknowledgement for this family also, that Swami had been listening to their prayers. Swami is with them. And it's also an equally great acknowledgement for me that he is also making his presence felt in Germany. I think for the interest of time, I would just stop here. But I would want to conclude with one small prayer, which has been lingering in my heart. Dearest Swami Bhagwan, fill us with your love. Fill us with your love such that, just like Krishna, how he blew through this flute and produced beautiful music, make us hollow. Remove the sense of mine, sense of ego, sense of desire from us. Make us hollow, Swami. Make us hollow such that your love flows through us. Make us hollow such that we reflect your love, Swami. We've taken births, we've taken millions of births. Enough, Swami. We've seen enough of this world. Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam. Do not give us one more chance again. Please end the cycle of birth and death right at this stage. Because we have had this greatest privilege of knowing you, of loving you, of yearning and pining for you. If we do not make use of this chance right now, I don't think we will ever make use of this opportunity, Swami. And as we all realize, Swami, this is not humanly possible. If not for your grace, this is definitely not humanly possible. Swami, take us through any difficulties, give us all difficulties, all pains. We are ready to go through this, Swami. But make sure, give us a promise that you will instill this burning thirst for your love, the burning thirst and pining for you in our life, Swami. May we live a life that is your message. May we love you. And as you once told me in a dream, what is it that I should do to make the best use of this avatar, Bhagwan? You told me in the dream, very cryptically, love happily. I've heard people say live happily, but I do not know the depth of the words that you told, love happily. May we love you happily, Swami, because this is the best thing that we could ever do when we have this precious avatar with us. Jai Sai Ram. स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्ताम् न्यायेन मार्गेण महीं महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यम् समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I thank you all for your very patient listening. I know it's not easy. I think it's already dinner time. Please forgive me if I crossed my time.
Sairam, thank you very much for the nice experience sharing. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Sairam.
Sai Ram.
Everyone. Bye.
Sai Ram all.
Sai Ram.
Sairam.